Welcome to the Lounge with Travefy Academy, where we get to hear from travel industry voices and experts to learn more about their story and also what they see on the horizon for travel professionals. And I'm Stephanie Grice, and our guest today is Martin Mussey, who is Business Development and Education Manager of Travel Leaders of Tomorrow, also with the Next Gen Travel Group. And welcome to the Lounge, Martin. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, this is really exciting. Yeah, I got to meet you a few weeks ago at Travel Leaders Edge, and then I'm like, hey, let's just pull you on. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's how this works.
Exactly. Get to network and meet really cool people like yourself. And
Sure.
before we dive into our topic of, just time management and all of the good stuff that comes with that, can you just tell us first, how did you find yourself in the travel industry?
So I found myself in the travel industry, one, just like all of us, a passion for travel, right? And having just that travel bug. But interestingly enough, after having a 16-year career in corporate America and in a real estate and relocation company, my wife actually had experienced a couple layoffs. And so, we hit this realization that we may need to take our future and our life in our own hands. So we were beginning to look at something that we might do together in retirement. It actually was thinking about it being a retirement gig thing. And I actually, with her, started launching into and learning about how to be our own independent travel agency or independent travel advisor. So that's how I got into it back in 2012, as a matter of fact, and ran a very part-time, I call it my part-time nights and evenings agency that I had for about 6 years. And that's how I found my way into the travel industry, just a love for it and saying, hey, I think I can do that, helping family with their travels. And I have people who come to me all the time for Disney travel knowledge. That's a big passion of mine, or we love going, our family loves going to Disney. So these are ways that we found ourselves in travel, which is not too uncommon for many of the other people I talk to as well.
Yeah, that seems to be the story right now, especially just coming through the pandemic, is so many new people entering the industry because of that entrepreneurial spirit, but also just like, hey, I like this and I would love to be able to plan these amazing, lifetime experiences for people. So makes sense. That's awesome. That's really cool. And so that tells us already so you have the corporate side and then the travel side. So you marry all that together to have this expertise in just how can you run your business really well. And one of those is time management. So I'm going to start off with the most burning question is, what is the secret to success here? So how can we obtain the best time management in our life and our jobs?
Well, can I tell you something shocking here
for
a moment? I always like to start off this topic about time management by sort of throwing everyone a little bit of a curveball. And I'm going to tell you this, that you can't manage time. How about that?
Can we start there? I thought it was going to be a lot easier than this, Martin.
I know, right? Part of it is that what we think of as a traditional way to manage time, or how we think of time. And that's what you almost have to have in your mind. How we think of time prevents us from being able to manage time well. So if you understand that first, then we can use that as a jumping off point for the rest of this conversation, for sure. How do you feel about that? I just told you we can't manage time. Should we end the podcast now?
Yeah, it just ends. So good luck, everyone. See you later. Best of luck to you. No, it does make sense though, honestly, because like time is. So I actually just saw something today that was like these little blocks of like how much you actually get done is not much, and like how much you can get done, but like, and then it shows you this huge block of how much you think you can do, and it's like unachievable. Like you literally, a lot of times you just actually don't have enough. But what can we do to start inching our way to try to get as close as we can to better manage it? So like, what kind of tips would you give?
Well, one of the first places that you really have to start is kind of starting with why. Why is this even important to you? Why is managing time important to you? So whatever it is that you're doing in terms of your business. Why do you want it to happen? Why do you want to have better time management? And you know, some of those motivations may be your family. It may be just the ability to travel more, get out and see the world, spending quality time with others. So if you don't really establish a strong why, it doesn't matter about anything else we talk about, because you won't ever get it done if the why isn't strong enough. So that's one of the first places to start. The other, and I'll just mention this real quick and turn it back over to you and see what you think, is that we also have to sort of understand ourselves first. What have we done previously with regard to time management? And there's a concept in time management where you sort of understand your style in time management. And I like to think of it in a couple extremes. And there's such a thing as being a focused time manager. And the other extreme is a chaotic time manager. And we all know those people. We also know the very focused people, right? But the majority of us actually land in the middle. And that term is called the nomad. The person in the middle is a little bit of, they can be focused, they can be chaotic at times. We're not one extreme or another. And but hey, chaos can take over, and we wonder how the heck did we lose focus and lose control? I was doing really good. What the heck happened? And so you just have to understand where you sit on that spectrum.
That's a good point. And what are some ways? I mean, I bet most people would understand, like, yep, that's me. But how can you identify yourself as one of those? So so very focused. I mean, that one, I feel like someone would identify themselves, like if they're very,
Right.
organized and very planet,
Right.
very focused. But what about like a nomad? How would you describe that person?
So the nomad is really, they can be organized. They have systems in place. They have things that they use. They write lists. They write on paper. They use electronic. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more, because we're headed towards really some practical ideas on things that people can do. But the nomad sometimes starts a system and then stops the system and gets distracted and goes over here and does something else, right? If they just have a couple different systems they can rely on, the reality is we're probably a little bit of a hybrid of a couple things. And so some practical ideas are going to be hybrid. It might be electronic, it might be paper, it might be, something else. So I think that's the main thing, is once you realize where you are, now we can launch into talking about what are some of those very practical things that we can do.
Yeah. And one last question before we get into like what can they
Yeah.
do is, what about how do you recognize yourself as chaotic? Because I wonder if it could be confused sometimes with nomad. Like what would a chaotic person like what would that look like generally?
Yeah. A chaos master, the
Chaos
person
master, I
who
love that.
the person who writes sticky notes and writes them and puts them in various places, and they need a sticky note to remind themselves where they put the sticky notes. Um, those people who write in one book and then write in another book, and then they type in their phone. And that's a little bit of a chaos master. Now, there's some people you could look at their desk, right? And you might look at it and think, how do they even know where everything is? But the chaos master has a plan. They would tell you, I know at least where to go. It may not be there, but I have an idea where all this stuff is. It doesn't mean that they're always messy. It just means that somebody else might look at it and be like, wow, that looks really disorganized. I don't know how they do that.
Yeah. Well, what I really love about this is that it doesn't matter what type of person you are, there's ways that you can help this. So, because I think
Oh
that's a
yeah.
good thing. I really like how you shared that at first, because it is really true when you think about like, oh, I need to be better time management. You think you need to be the most organized, perfect person, but that's
No,
not it. It's working
no.
with your strengths. And I love that. That is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, figure that out. And the other thing, and I'm just going to throw this out there to say that this is something I speak of often in a lot of my trainings, and having come from an HR background in the corporate world for a while, is this focus that we have to have work-life balance. And I really almost hate the word balance, because there's no such thing. You talk about perfection, you're never going to be perfectly balanced. So what I really like to teach is that people just need to find the harmony. They need to understand that there's going to be times where they're focused on something more that is family, their personal lives, or something like that, other than the business. And other times they know when they need to really focus on the business. And it will feel out of alignment at times, but you almost have to be okay with that and acknowledge it, and then just figure out where that harmony is.
Yeah. Oh, that is so nice. I feel like there's a lot of people listening to this like, "Oh, thank you. Yes, this is exactly what I need." I need to hear this, especially
It's
it's been
okay.
very busy. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay. It's been a really busy time, this summer, just so much the travel boom. It's all great stuff, but it's really crazy and can be very chaotic even for the very focused person.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, absolutely.
oh yeah,
Absolutely.
just so crazy. And so this is very timely. But what are those first steps that someone can start taking once they start realizing, this is how I function. So how can I function to the highest of my ability, basically?
So let me first go back to the concept of time, where I started out and I jarred everyone to say we can't manage time. Okay. Let me explain that a little bit. And this isn't just my own thinking. This comes from my time as a business coach when I was helping other folks with their businesses, and not just in the travel industry. I was helping people across all kinds of industries. And I realized the thing I needed to help them with the most was time management. So I had been searching for that thing that spoke to people. And this was it. It came from a Inc. magazine article. And I sort of took those concepts out of that to translate it this way. And here's what it is. I mentioned time, and that we're just not thinking of time in the correct way. And here's what it is. Let me ask you, since you're going to stand in for the rest of our audience for a
Oh
moment,
man.
if I asked you, what's the definition of time? What is the literal definition of time?
Oh, that is really hard because like time is time. It's a space that is not really there, but I look at time based on outside. Like, oh, it's dark, so now it's basically like I sleep now.
Right.
That's how
Right.
I
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at
Yeah. Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And, and then, but when we get down to the really literal part of time, as defined by the people who help create From Night to Day, where do we apply time? It's the 60 minutes in a day. It's
Mhm.
60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. That's the literal time. And what do we know about time? Time does not stop, right? It just keeps going. And this is the hard part about managing time, because it's just going to keep going. And we're trying to harness this. So the idea is time is broken up into two categories. The literal definition I just talked about is real time. That's real time.
Mhm.
We have to manage not real time, but we're tricked into doing that with our little appointment calendars and all that, because it says 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. We're tricked into thinking that's the time we're trying to manage. But what you're really trying to manage is what's called real time. And real time is the perception of time. Now, let me explain that. The perception of time, our perception of time, is when you go to the DMV to renew your license, 1 hour feels like how long?
Yeah, it's true. Feels way
And
longer. Yeah.
And when you go on vacation and you are looking forward and you're like, I've got 7 days. Oh, I can't wait. How does that time seem to go? It just flies by,
Fast.
right?
Mhm.
That's perception of time. So we're just in time management, where you start is just deal with managing our perception of time. And you can only manage, and what this article had said, you can only manage time in three ways. And it's thoughts, it's conversations, and it's action. So in our thoughts, we think things so many times throughout the day that are valuable, but we never capture it. And those thoughts can lead to some really engaging and good conversations, which then lead us to action. So thought, how many times have we put our head down on the pillow at night and we're thinking to ourselves, oh, I got this tomorrow, this, I hope I remember that. And do we? And we'll wake up the next day and go, what was that thing that I was going to try to remember?
Yeah.
So a strategy for that is, get a journal, so even a small notebook or journal by the side of the bed. So you're writing these things down, you're capturing them. That's the idea behind thoughts, is how do you capture the thought so you can turn it into a conversation and or an action? And that's the beginning steps of time management, to answer your question.
That is awesome. It's crazy because it's so mind-blowing, but then when you think about it, you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Obviously,
Right,
yes.
right.
So it's whittling it down. It's so easy every day to get caught up in time, basically,
Right.
and lose it so fast. And
Right.
so that is a really good point of I like that, getting a journal and just writing. So then that way you just can put it down and then you come back to it when you're ready.
Right. When people go on vacation, how many times have, I'm sure you've done it, I've done it, where we're like, I'm going away and I'm not going to think about the office, the work, all that back there. And we do, right? And we might be with family and friends. I've shared this trick with a lot of people going on vacations, business owners that I know who need to go and spend some time and allow themselves the space so they can be healthy mentally. And I'm like, take a journal, write in it. And when you have the thought, don't ignore it. Even if you have them throughout at the end of the day, or if you have to, write it down as soon as possible so it gets it out of your head. And then you can go back and be engaged with your family, friends, and back in your vacation, because all those thoughts will be there waiting for you when you come back to the office.
Mm-hmm. So would you recommend also, because you mentioned a journal, but what about if you have like notes on your phone, or is there kind of a key to that? Like
Absolutely.
you can do that still. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always give the example of driving down the road, right? You shouldn't be writing in a journal,
Yeah.
but
You can do like a voice memo.
right. You can do and I don't want to say anybody's name that starts with an S or an A, but all you have to do is, those of us, whether you're Android or, whatever, just say, hey, and their name, take this note. And yes, you record a voice memo to yourself. Now, I always tell people, here's the trick on that though. You may have to put a little 5-minute little blip in your calendar that says, check my voice memos.
Yes, that's a good idea. Yeah. Listen to them. Yeah. So is that another thing that you put, like, what about, because a lot of times I see with time management is blocking off time and trying, but is that a good way to do it? Or because the one thing that I always think about, and I think a lot of people run into, is it looks great when you see it ahead of yourself, but then things come up and then it just gets crazy. So do you tend to do that, or do you try to stick to some type of a schedule?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it works really well, but remember, you have to go back to knowing yourself best and knowing what your, are you focused, chaotic, what's going to work best for you. That's called a productivity style, by the way. And what is your productivity style? What's worked for you? Who are you? You got to know that. But yes, I think time blocking works really well, but here's the difference. To me, I translate it into something that I call a daily diary. And the daily diary is not just your business life, but it's all aspects of your life. And that you're time blocking it and putting it into the digital calendar or the paper calendar or hybrid, whichever works. And that you're putting it in there and you're color coding different areas of your life. So let's say it's business and it's green because you want to make money in your business, and you color code that green. And then your other aspects of your life, including family life, including my volunteerism, my other job, who knows, whatever it may be, but you have a different color assigned to each category or areas of your life that you're doing. So this way, when you say looking ahead to the calendar, you're seeing all those parts of your life and not leaving one out and forgetting. And when somebody says to you, hey, do you have time to talk to me? And you open up your calendar, it doesn't matter all the colors. Guess what you're actually looking for? You're just looking for the blank space, right? And I'm looking for the open spaces so I can be realistic when it comes to the concept of managing real time. And by the way, the blocks you put on the calendar have to be realistic in real time. I may say I'm going to sit down and write this thing or do some administrative work in my business, the accounting in my business, whatever. But in the beginning, I might have to say, I think that'll take an hour and a half. Let me be generous and make it 2 hours. And then as I get a better idea of what that is, then I'll shrink the time. But I have to be realistic and know in managing real time that that may take that long. So that's the time blocking and using the daily diary with the colors that I really like to take what you asked about and put it in that aspect.
Yeah, and that actually made me think of something because I remember before when we were talking before this, I really liked how you had your Calendly set up so that it was you could see that you had blocks that were for specific types of subjects. So, like agents listening, one thing that I think is really cool is if you use a tool like Calendly, decide, okay, I'll do my consultations or my client calls only during the afternoon of these days or
Right.
something. And
Right.
I thought that was really smart. And then also ahead of time, like what that next day, what you're expecting and
Right.
what could potentially come up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And this you just brought up something that looking ahead, right? This is one simple trick for everybody is to literally open up your calendar. If once you get really good at the daily diary and putting things in your calendar and that time blocking, opening it up the night before and just glancing at it. There's nothing to be done. Like you don't want to burden yourself with the, okay, what's the actual task? Just look at what's my day look like. That's it. What's the day look like tomorrow? Because if you do that, you've mentally and subconsciously prepared yourself to be ready at whatever. There's a difference between I've got an 8 a.m. call that I need to be attentive to versus a 10 a.m. call. You wake up in a different way and your brain, because you looked at the brain as a powerful tool, and your brain is going to help you say, hey, you looked at this last night, you've got to be ready. Whereas otherwise we kind of go, oh, I got some time, I can drink the coffee, be a little slower this morning, it's okay.
Yep, exactly. No, it's so true. You know when you're ready, when you have things and kind of another thing that I've thought about too is do you do a lot about kind of on your figuring out what times you work best doing things? So for example, if you're a morning person and maybe trying to schedule certain things in the morning versus the afternoon, or do you take that into account when like for your own personal schedule as well?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I know, especially when I was as an independent advisor and I ran my own business, a business coaching firm for 5 years, simultaneous to doing that. I knew I was better off doing my administrative work in the mornings. And I set aside 2 hours of time every Monday morning because Mondays seemed to be, still a little bit of time before the week got ramped up. And yeah, absolutely. I think everyone should take that into consideration. When do you work best? Especially when you're setting your own personal calendar. And here's the other thing about setting your personal calendar. Take you and your tendencies into consideration. That's important. And make every appointment with yourself as if it was an appointment with somebody else, because you're that important as a business owner. And it's inevitable that you're going to look at a time block on your calendar and go, oh, that's just me. It's only impacting me, so no big deal. You should try to resist that as much as possible because you put the block there for a reason. And follow the mantra that if I erase it, replace it, right? If I have to take that block away or cut the time down, to give it to somebody else or something else, try to immediately move it someplace else. Or if you've put it on your calendar on a regular basis, you might be able to make the at least you can do the analysis right then that says, well, you know what? I do this thing every Monday for 2 hours. Next Monday, I only need an hour. No big deal. I'm caught up. It's all good. You get to make those decisions for yourself. But sometimes you need to go do it, especially when on your time calendar, some of that time is for your own personal health and well-being appointments.
Yeah, true.
Those
are very important.
Yeah. Don't, getting out, doing that walk, doing some reading, whatever it is that's important to you, don't shortchange yourself on those things.
Yeah. And man, I just keep thinking of questions now for you. Is another one here though is, do you believe in any type of logic when you're creating your schedule? Like you should make sure that at least 25% of your time is dedicated just to you, or is that really just kind of up to the person? Like you decide how that works, or also is that you don't need to manage it to that extent?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because there's going to be some people who are going to be like, gosh, I don't want to be overscheduled and I don't want to, do whatever. So I think it's up to the individual, but if there was any mathematical equation that I gave to an entrepreneur building their business, then I would say that, especially when you're the person doing the business, if you thought about it in terms of a 40-hour work week, right? Then 35 hours of that is working what I call in the business, and 5 hours of that is working on the business, strategizing, setting your time, planning. It's business planning and strategizing for 5 hours. So 5 hours a week is about right in terms of either planning or strategizing, and where you put that 5 hours and what you categorize in that 5 hours. You just want to know that it's the kind of activities that are about planning and strategizing for your business rather than being in the business doing the thing that you need to do.
That is awesome. I really like that. And I can just think like that can be really fun too, because you're like, this could be your time, go to a coffee shop and just, listen to your favorite music. Just, it's a fun time. So that's a really good tip. I like that.
Well, and like when you think 5 hours, you're like, okay, well, that's like 1 hour a day.
Yeah.
And I can break it up however you want. All of a sudden now you've given somebody a direction of 5 hours. You're like, all right, well, I can't do that every day, but I'll take 2 hours this day, 2 hours this day, and a half hour on this day. Whatever works for you, if you can get that equation to work out. And by the way, if you're out there working with a business coach, or working with any life coach, or working with that 1 hour you spend with them is one of those hours.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that. That's really great. And oh man, so many tips. I love this is a really great podcast episode. But before though we start to wrap up or anything, is there anything that I haven't asked or that we haven't covered that would be really helpful to talk about?
So I think what I'll share with you, there's two things that I'll share with you. And one of them, most people have heard of, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right?
Yeah.
And that plays a good part. Lots of people who teach time management speak to that. But the concept out of that, I'm not sending you all to go read a book or anything like that. And the part that I want to share with you is one of the things that he shares in that book is that the idea of a time target. And that time target talks about things that are in our life that are not urgent and not important, the things that are urgent and not important, urgent and important, and not urgent but important. And so I'll just give you a couple quick examples, because we still have to contend with being honest with ourselves and looking in the mirror. And so sometimes as entrepreneurs, or being virtual or home-based or whatever you want to call it, one of those not urgent and not important things, we're all on social media. We need to be on social media for our businesses, But then we get on social media and 3 hours later, we've gone down a rabbit hole. Well, that would definitely be in the not urgent, not important category, right? I don't need to check my social media, or do I, or what, again, this is an area that you should probably set aside a time block for that. And what are other time wasters that we tend to get ourselves into? So that's just something we all need to be a little bit honest with ourselves. And then the last thing, I told you two things. The last thing I want to share with you is to kind of wrap up that concept of what I talked about: thoughts, conversation, and action. I just want to give some quick tips on the conversation and action part, because when it comes to conversations, if we've written the things down, those thoughts are going to tell us, oh, I had an idea of somebody to either talk to network with, to call a client, to do whatever, which will lead to an action. So in those conversations, I always share this with people. How many times have you gotten on the phone and you have talked, and then you get off the phone, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask them whatever, right? You don't want to feel like an idiot to call them back up and go, hey, sorry. So you're like, well, I'll get that the next time I talk to them. So the tip here is just write down a quick script, and it's not a full script. It's just bullet points of the things you want to cover with a client, with a colleague, with whatever on that phone call. Just the quick bullet points. Spend 2 minutes. What do I want to get accomplished on this call? So this way, as you're talking, you can just tick those off, right? And okay, I covered it all. And then after the phone call, spend another very quick minute asking yourselves this question or these questions. Did I get accomplished what I wanted to get done? And do I have a follow-up action? Because guess what? The follow-up action goes into a time block on the daily diary. You've got to find a place to put that, or to remind yourself to do that. So that's that one. And then in the actions, action is all about take action on what you said it was, and find the place either in your daily diary or where you need to put it, because that's the key to time management is planning for it, but obviously is the action oriented part to get it done.
Yeah. Man, this has been so helpful, even just for me personally, like just knowing this needs to get accomplished. And I like that too. It's very smart. It seems like one of the easiest things to do, but it is really smart when you have those bullet points before a call. Because I've noticed if I do that, it's way more successful.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much that tiny little thing that you wouldn't think is such a big deal changes it.
Yeah. Yeah. And and in the end, be kind to yourself as well. This is not perfection. Stephanie and I were actually having a brief conversation just before this about, this topic and everything. The potential striving for perfection. Something's going to fall apart and something's not going to work. And that's okay. And that's that idea of work-life harmony. Be okay with taking it in stride and knowing it's not going to be perfection. But if at least you've committed yourself and you have a good, strong why, you're going to get it done, and have grace with yourself.
I like that. That's really important because, again, what we were saying is, and it's usually when you start getting really busy that you have to figure out your better system to make sure it works. And I like the word harmony, not balance, harmony, because they work together. Some weeks are going to be different than other weeks, but they harmonize.
For sure.
Sure. I love this. Well, thank you so much again. This is, I bet so many people, and if people are listening to this while they're driving, they're probably going to be making some audio notes after this because, oh my gosh, there's so many.
I hope so.
Yes. Yeah. Don't
be
write
safe
right now.
out there, people.
Yeah, of course. But thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this episode of the Lounge with Travefy Academy. And thank you again to our special guest, Martin, for joining us here today. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast or subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of the latest episodes. And we hope you enjoyed our conversation today and join us again. But for now, stay safe out there, and we'll catch you on the next flight.
Take care, everyone.